accomplishment.
Yeah.
So, and if you've fallen in love with the feeling of being busy, there's not really a lot of discernment. You're just doing, a lot of doing and less being. So, so that's kind of an interesting thing. And we're culturalized to that. I always took pride in working a lot. Now it's just being balanced, working optimally is more important, because what's a lot? That's it's different, it's different to each of us and where we are in our lives, and and what we're valuing, what's important. Working a lot is different when you're starting a family compared to when you're retired, so we're, different seasons.
And I like your point, Ken, in the fact of, doing is different than accomplishing.
Yeah.
And, and, and I'll be transparent here. When I'm stressed or anxious, I do a lot because it's really a great way to me kind of focus that energy.
Yeah.
And so it used to be that I would clean when I was
Mm.
anxious or fearful, or something really like upsetting happened. And a friend of mine would come home and I'd be like after work and I'd be scrubbing the kitchen floor and she'd be looking at Lou, she'd just look at me and go, I guess it wasn't a good day. My sister-in-law cooks, I mean, it's just like this, there's certain things that we do where we kind of that feel just like, oh, okay, well, I have something in my life under control, even though we all know that nothing, you know. And so I just think that doing versus actually accomplishing is really good differentiation.
Mm. Yeah, and it must. I bet you your responsive practice is movement. So like everybody, like minds think. So if I'm in that state, I want to study or understand more, or like whoever's cooking, that's someone that's more fuel. Like someone who will, they'll cook or they'll eat it as a way to process. It's interesting how we all have our thing though,
Well,
that helps
I
us.
mean, one of the things I do is I'm a yoga teacher. So I'm very
Oh,
used
cool.
to kind of taking that energy or whatever those emotions are, whatever's happening, and grounding or coming to a place of
Hmm.
equanimity or balance in that
Yeah.
form. So moving, like, moving is true. To me,
Yep.
moving is very healing and very.
So here we are kind of lifting the hood on people that go through their normal lives. And while it's going on, there's probably not necessarily a lot of introspection or self-auditing or those sorts of things. It's kind of comes afterwards for people who have been trained that it's possible to take a notice of what you've been doing and now maybe lay some metrics on it and decide whether or not it's a practice that you want to continue, or if it's something that you're interested in maybe altering in the future. And that's that thing that I was talking about, 7.5 billion people around the world. We're really fortunate. The three of us have time to sit here and talk about thinking about or not thinking about whatever it is that we're doing, and then analyzing whether, our approach is to be in motion or it's to stop and think about it. This is really, when you talk about having, the best of all possible worlds, we have the time, we have the safety. I don't know, I live in a warm home and I'm very fortunate for that and I'm very thankful for it. And my wife, on the other hand, was out in 9-degree weather this morning, delivering mail or doing whatever she's doing. And in the process of doing that all day long, she gets to have these little moment by moment experiences with things that work and things that don't work. And, it is really like listening to George Patton coming back, from his march across Europe and saying, now we came up on France and this is where this happened. And she's talking about a poodle or a golden doodle or whatever it is. And then the big smile on her face and an outright laugh, and then she's got a little internal joke that she has to let me in after she's had the laugh. And it's just a remarkable experience for me, to go through this debrief with her every afternoon. Sometimes it's over dinner, sometimes it's just the two of us sitting here in our recliners. And you were talking about your spaces that you go to in your home. Well, I'm sitting in mine, and this is where I choose to interact with the world from. If I'm online, and if I'm not online, I want to be out there on the firing line, walking up and down Main Street, meeting people, greeting human beings, giving folks hugs if it's appropriate. And in the meantime, just reminding myself, from time to time. And I say this right now because I really do want to be reminded how lucky I am to be me and be alive and coming in contact with all of these people, friends, strangers, folks I may only see one time. Go to the post office, the hustle and the bustle. And do people have their masks on? Well, some have them half on. It's just all of this soup of enjoyment to just kind of have these thoughts and reactions to folks that are coming and going. And if I were to turn this off and to close my eyes and lean back in my chair, that would be a completely different experience of the world, wouldn't it? So having that freedom of choice to do either or and everything else that we haven't talked about, it's an extraordinary place to be as a human being, to know that there is that choice available, I say.
Yeah.
So in terms of reducing stress or getting back on track, or whatever it is, when you notice that you're less than at peak performance, effectiveness, we do have to notice that about ourselves to make an adjustment, yes? So what kind of adjustment do you both make? And how would you be self-governing and self-nurturing and self-auditing in that process?
Want to go first, Jan?
No, you can go ahead, Ken.
Oh.
She wants to know how deep down the rabbit hole you're going to go.
No, I just figured that either way is fine.
Pretty simple, really. I mean, we've talked about it before. It's just making deposits in advance every day in little ways. So I've got my little Move, Think, Connect, Fuel, and Power formula there that we use. And it's just, take a few minutes to, make sure that something movement, exercise related, nourishment, learn something, discover something new, and they're just little practices each day. And then when the things happen, you're more prepared. I mean, the decades of training in martial arts and all that kind of stuff, when I blew out my AC and tore all the ligaments out, that's what helped me heal, and if I hadn't done all that stuff in advance, when the injury happened, it probably wouldn't have healed as well. So, so I think it's a lot of times, and I would see this in martial arts, you'd have someone come in to start training after they were attacked, or bullied or whatever it was. And now they're trying to play catch up on something that's occurred and fix it after the fact. It's like trying to change your diet after you have the heart attack. There's different, if we're just thinking each day we have an opportunity to do some little things that will accumulate over time, then it strengthens us. I mean, yoga is a phenomenal example of that. How much less likely are you to be injured or end up with a stroke or some kind of immune system issue if you practice yoga every day before you need it, and then it's there for you when you actually need it.
I had that experience. Well, I think I know that experience, but just to respond to that specifically, in June I fell and walking the dog, and I fractured my right radius. And I, went and did everything they said or whatever. But after I got through therapy, the wrist forearm orthopedist I saw, elbow, said he has never seen anybody regain full range of motion before.
Yep.
An injury like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it has to be, all the whatever poses all those years.
Absolutely.
And the full extension that I had before to be able to recoup like that. I mean, just has to be.
Yeah. Oh, fun side note for that. I would say to adults for decades, the one skill I guarantee that you will use that you learn in a martial arts class is how to fall safely. I mean, you may never be attacked, but at some point,
we'll chat after.
yeah, I've had so many that would say, yeah, I slipped on the ice, I fell on the stairs, and I remembered, I relaxed, and I know I would have gotten hurt a lot more if I hadn't developed that skill. But it's funny, it's like, you spend these years in class getting knocked on the ground and learning how to actually relax into that process. And at some point you're going to use it, but you can't predict when. So
Right.
all you can do is practice until it happens. And yeah, so you basically did prehab for years before that injury happened. I guarantee that had a significant impact on the result that you experienced.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think for me, I always return to my breath. That is like my anchor, no matter where I am. That is like, it's my best measure for how I'm feeling. If I hold my breath, if my breath seems very rapid, I just automatically, I'm like, okay, pause and breathe. Just pause and breathe. It's like my kind of reflex place to go. And so that has been probably one of my most useful practices, because you can do it anywhere. No matter where you are, you can stand online in the grocery store. And I remember doing that in the beginning when COVID first hit. And that was like very stressful. There were lines, people were wearing masks. You didn't know, we didn't really know how easily transmissible it was. And I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, okay, just breathe. Just breathe. And so I think I like the portability of it. Yeah. For me, I think one of my biggest anchors has been the element of gratitude, is really to find like the smallest thing from the largest thing to be thankful for. And one of the practices, as a yoga teacher, amongst the other things I do, I remember, I think every yoga workshop you ever do in your life tells you to keep a gratitude journal. That's just like something that you should do. And I was never very successful at it. They would sit there and say, well, you have to write down 10 things in a day that you're grateful for. And I would be like, when I didn't find 10 things, I would feel like I was this horrible person. Like I was a failure. Like, how could I not find 10 things that I was grateful for? And so during COVID, and I have a great picture, during COVID, what happened was I first of all said, okay, I'm going to think of one thing every day, like one thing every day that I'm grateful for. And I decided that I was going to write it on Post-it notes, and I was going to put it on a wall in my kitchen. So originally when it started, I didn't think it was, and by the time I finally took it all down, it was like a wall and a half of my kitchen, because I just kept them up. And I think for me, it was a great visual. Like I'd be having a hard day or something, and I just look up, and right in front of my face were like these 100 Post-it notes of like, Jan, like, get a grip. Like, look at how much you have to be grateful for. And that was huge for me.
That's perfect. That's exactly what we're talking about. Where actually you are too busy. Reminding yourself what a blessed person you are, that you have all this stuff to be grateful for. I like that. And I really have to tell you, I was a huge sticky monster for all through the 90s. When I could put sticky notes on my computer, they actually had a little application at one point that was called Stickies that went down in the in the tray in the bottom of the computer. I have thousands of stickies in that old file that I can now only open up as a text file because the application no longer works. But I've got quotes from people all over the world. I've got, little isms from AOL. I've got whatever, and I can just imagine, the power. You've both heard of affinity exercises, right? Where everyone writes down their comments about, something that needs to happen. And then one by one, they go up and they place their sticky notes, in categories where they think they should be grouped with other things that are of a similar, kind of a tone. But it's a powerful way then to walk around and look at everybody's notes and thoughts on a subject without having to have a verbal, out loud conversation where people are thinking about something else. You're just reading the sticky notes and you're experiencing the ideas with